Speaking of really good movies and books, we got a whole series of Revelation questions for you guys here.
All right, here we go.
Assuming we are already in or at least near the end times as portrayed in Revelation, what is or what will be the mark of the beast, the 666, and are Christians in fact warned not to accept or receive that designation?
Greg's been thinking and praying about this deeply for years, so I'm going to let Greg
Here we go.
answer.
I have. I haven't been, it has been a topic that I've been interested in. Look, first thing, get your life from Jesus Christ. All your worth, all your significance, all your life from Jesus Christ, okay? Because what I find in dealing with end times, it's like talking on some other theological topics and politics, is that if a person's been taught one way of looking at things, that's all they've known, they equate that with orthodoxy, so that if you question it, it just causes cognitive dissonance in them, and if there's any source of their worth and significance that is rooted in their view of Revelation, they can get very angry. I want to propose a different way of looking at this, but I hope you don't get angry. But here's the thing, is that a lot of folks today think that the book of Revelation is written sort of like to be a newspaper that you read that is about the last 7 years or 14 years, depending on your interpretation, of the history of the earth. God gives us sort of a snapshot of what's going to take place at the end of time. That is one view of Revelation. There are other views, however. In fact, that view of Revelation hasn't been the standard one throughout church history. There's a good book I'd recommend reading. It's called Four Views of Revelation, put out by Zondervan, where it discusses the four main views of the book of Revelation throughout history. There's what's called the preterist view. And that view interprets the book of Revelation as being primarily about a first century thing. It's first century. Then there's the idealist view, which says that it's about it's a symbolic portrayal of spiritual warfare that takes place throughout all of history. Then you have what's called the progressive view, which really began in the Reformation period, and that view holds that it's about the unfolding of history, and the last two chapters are about the very, very end. And then you have, more recently, the futuristic view, which is that the whole book, at least chapters 4 on, is about what's going to take place during the end times. It's very important when you read any book of the Bible to read it in its original context and read it according to the genre it was written in. The original context is the church of the first century. John 6 times says to the church at Asia Minor, and he lists the different places. 4 times he says these are things which are very soon going to take place. 5 times in the book he says act quickly. And so, from my perspective, using ordinary exegetical standard rules, we should interpret the book the way a first century would interpret the book, as something that's going to soon take place. And read it according to the genre. That's the type of literature it is, and it's apocalyptic literature. So you have to know a little bit about the kinds of symbols that were used in apocalyptic literature. They use a lot of, sometimes been called surrealistic poetry. The beast and the mark and all those things are very standard in apocalyptic literature. And so to get in on this book, you need to know something about the first century context and the first century, or the type of literature that apocalypse was. So in my view, I think the book of the Revelation, like all the books of the Bible, the primary application is the application it would have had to the original audience. And so we have to ask, what would 666 mean to someone in the first century? Turns out that is a perfect, if you translate the letters into numbers, which was common in the first century, Nero Caesar comes out to equate to 666. So that's a very plausible association there. Nero Caesar was the beast that was being spoken of there. And so on for all the other symbols that are found there. There's actually a commentary I'd recommend for you that's also called Four Views of Revelation, where it goes through the whole book of Revelation and offers the different perspectives that each of the 4 interpretations has of particular passages. And you'd be surprised to find how close some of the correlations are between the things that are in Revelation and the things that happened in the first century. One more example, and then I'll shut up. The tribulation period, the Great Tribulation period, 42 weeks of tribulation. It might be a coincidence, or it may be more significant than that, that's the exact amount of time that the Romans sieged Jerusalem, 3.5 years. And the great war between the Jews and the Romans took place. And many scholars argue that the primary meaning of the tribulation period was that. Now, having said that, it's also true, as with all the books of the Bible, that there are timeless principles that apply throughout history. And so we read the Bible to find those principles as they speak to us. The book of Revelation has always been profoundly significant to Christians, especially when they're in persecution, that they will overcome by the blood of the Lamb, that God is victorious in the end. But in terms of trying to look at the book of Revelation to figure out, is Henry Kissinger the Antichrist? You know, is the European market the head of the beast? I really think that is, honestly, there's better uses of your time.